Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We thought we'd give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes glimpse of some of the things we do at Business Sherpa Group in terms of collaboration, problem solving, and brainstorming. One simple aspect is our HR Coffee, a weekly connect that we have to discuss the current challenges of COVID-19 and some of the challenges we're facing and some suggestions and ideas that we have of how to deal with this. So we're going to kind of simulate one of those calls today and take you around some of our thoughts, some of our suggestions, and yeah, just take a few minutes. So I'm going to pass it over to Sylvie and let Sylvie start off with some questions.
Great. Well, my name is Sylvie Plante. I live in Ottawa, and a lot of the work that I have been doing in the past has been kind of remote or online. And so I'm able to extend that now. But in speaking with clients or people who work with clients, a number of questions have come up in relation to COVID and the transition that we're making. And from an HR perspective, some of the questions that have come up are like, how, as we come back to work, for example, do we bring in the perspectives of different parts of the organization in order to develop strategies? And how do we translate those strategies into actual tools that we can use? Another thing is, how much of what we've been doing do we continue or do we let go of? As you know, most people have been working remotely. And when people have been surveyed, often many of them want to continue to work remotely. And we know that in New Zealand today, they were proposing a 4-day work week, for example. So how many of these changes that were meant to be temporary will become kind of more permanent? And also, of course, communication is so important. How do we communicate? What do we communicate are important questions as well. And finally, I would say, are there new metrics that we need to consider in our work? And we've seen from policymakers, for example, that they've identified speed over perfection as kind of a shift that needed to be made, where they've launched programs and then kind of edited them along the way. And they did that on a national scale. Well, organizations need to reflect on doing that as well. So those are some of the questions that I have from an HR perspective.
Those are great. Thanks, Sylvie. Bev, your perspective?
I'm Bev Dewan, also based in Ottawa, and similar to Sylvie, I'm actually dealing with a client that they really truly never worked from home. It was an exception and would be a really significant reason that they would need in order to approve the exception. So suddenly everybody had to work from home. And of course, it's not the normal working from home with the children at home. It's a very different environment than what we would consider in the past working from home. And we just did an employee engagement survey just to see how it was going working from home. And we asked if there were concerns about coming back to the office. And the majority said, yes, there were concerns, and they're very concerned about the safety in the office. And in looking at, some protocols that we've seen, that different articles that I've seen, and I looked at the Alberta government, they have their plan phase of how to make the environment safe. It's going to be a very challenging thing because this organization that I'm talking about, it's got open concept. It has no dividers between the desks. The desks are quite close together. And so if you are bringing them back, then you're not going to be able to have everybody back at once. And there's often, we're going to have to make sure that we've got the right measures for them to protect themselves and social distance. And maybe it's going to be a staggered return, or maybe some will continue to work from home. And in the survey as well, of course, most people loved not having to commute. So that was a really positive aspect of working from home. And some of them had said that they hoped that maybe they could continue to work from home after, because they really are quite enjoying it. So I think that's one of the biggest things on the client's minds, is how can you make it safe and bring people back in the office environment?
Absolutely. Anne, how about we go to you next?
Great. Well, actually, a good segue from Bev. And great that you've done the engagement survey. I think I'll touch base with you on that, because I'd like to do that with one of our customers too. And the segue is what came up with one of my customers yesterday is wanting to get the employees back in the office as soon as possible. So we're jumping now into that next phase. And, the questions come up similarly to yours. First we started with, from the people perspective, what do you do with individuals that do have children at home and don't have any child care available? And, what is fair and what isn't from the owner's perspective, for those that don't have children, do they have to come back in the office? Do they not? So we're going to have a chat with people individually and try and understand what the different perspectives are and understand what we're dealing with. And the second part is around, as you had mentioned, is the protocol. So now bringing them back into the office, we need to review, all the health and safety documents, workplace safety. There's been a lot of Ontario guidelines defined by sector. So we need to look at those and see what do we need to follow for our business and come up with some protocol. And then the other part of it, going back, the question is, what are the legal risks, right? What are some of the risks from the employer perspective? What do we do if someone doesn't feel safe and they want to come back? And what do we do around, you can't afford to bring 40 people back and somebody gets sick and the whole office gets wiped out. So what are we going to do to try and protect those people? Do you look at split shifts, those kinds of things? So again, I think it feels like we're entering into that next stage now where we really need to get proactive and get some plans in place for the customer. So that's what's on my plate this week.
Adrienne? Oh, Adrienne, I think you're on mute.
I was saying, like, we're all seeing very similar things with our clients. I think with COVID, my clients reacted very quickly to having people work from home, and within sort of right away, within a day, people were they had laptops and things like that. So it was, from a technology perspective, it was very easy. I think what's changing as we realize that this is not a one-time crisis situation or a one-time will be done in a few weeks, is that leaders are starting to look at, well, how do I move to that future state? How do I set up my organization so that as we bring people back, or even if we don't bring people back right away, we've created something that's more of an integrated plan around how we run our business. And so they're starting to look at the discussions are starting to move from, getting people at home and getting them back to how do we create the right culture as we move forward so that you're able to engage your people, you're able to, leaders are able to inspire people from, who don't come back to work right away. You're able to drive productivity in your organization. You're able to create your trust with your customers because they know you're no longer as connected as you were before. And I think, more than ever, it's going to be, what we're talking about is that it's going to be a real opportunity for the businesses who are able to look at it as future state and how we work as as the new organization. What does work look like in the future? And we're talking about things like investing in technology. We've all seen how we're on it right now. We've seen how technology has become so very important to organizations, and so the organizations were able to realize that they do need to think differently about how we work in the future. Are starting to look at what investments do we need to make now, so that as we move forward, whether or not we come back today or tomorrow, it's more around how we work with our people in the future, how we engage our customers in the future, and how we drive productivity in the organization as we move forward.
Excellent. I completely agree. How about you, Forrest? Oh, Forrest, you're on mute. We all do it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a true conference call if we didn't have a couple of those. We're just in line with the moment. So I think what Adriana touched upon about culture is really important right now. And one of the things that I'm seeing with some of my clients who weren't set up for remote work, this wasn't something that they did prior to the situation, is that they're running into some issues around trust. And between employees and employers. And on the employer side of that, being able to have faith in the productivity of their employees when they don't have that direct engagement with them that they used to have in an office environment, and are now having to come to terms with the fact that they may not have that same level of oversight for the short term at the very least, as we look to coming back to work in a staggered way. And I think that comes to a requirement of needing to encourage transparency from your employees, and then not punishing them if they provide that transparency to you and let you know that they're having real issues with that productivity. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at a situation that's not just everyone has to work from home, it's everyone has to work from home because of a global pandemic. And there's all kinds of mental health and stressors related to that where I think we're going to be seeing well past the immediacy of this crisis as people adapt to that. But on the other side of that, as we are starting to come back to work, and as we have some of our clients and some employers in Ontario have been working in an office environment or within a factory environment for the duration of this crisis, trust can also flip to the other side of that, where there needs to be trust that from the employee that their employer is doing everything they can to protect them as they either return to work or have been working throughout COVID-19. And one of the things that I've found success with my clients who have been working in that environment is being very open and transparent with their employees about what they're doing to keep them safe. And that a lot of obviously employers want to keep their employees safe, from an ethical and a legal liability standpoint. But it's not enough just to do that. You have to go over above and beyond to tell employees about what you're doing to keep them safe, to address the unique challenges of COVID-19, so that they can know what you're doing and have the foundation to provide that trust in you, in the work that you're doing to protect them.
Excellent, thank you. Todd?
Yeah, thanks. And I think Forrest has created a bit of a good segue for me as well, in that we're looking at it both internally at BSG, obviously, because part of it too is we're hearing from our clients, but we want to sort of set a standard and provide guidance as well, right, to our clients in terms of models and possibilities that we can share with the clients and to the associates in terms of guiding and coaching them through this back to work as well. But I think to Forrest's point, one thing we're doing even before that is worrying about, not so much worrying, but just really trying to ensure we can keep the employees engaged. Because again, to Forrest's point, this isn't just simply working from home. This is working from home during a global pandemic, and there's a big difference, right? You're isolated. You feel guilt that we have people trying to spend 8 hours a day at their desk, which at home, which is not possible. You don't do that in a normal work environment. So it's getting people's mindset around the notion of that 8 by 5 hour work week is not manageable, right? And it's not the expectation either. We're starting to so it's really how do we make sure our employees don't suffer that that fatigue, that uncertainty, and as things do somewhat start to normalize, we can engage them and keep up the great productivity that we've been seeing throughout this. So, and in terms of getting back to work, we have engaged our landlord as well. I mean, first for us will be really understanding what are the safety measures being put in place on our premises, right? And then really going out to the employees, because we have employees who are desperate to get back to work, to be honest. They want to get out of the isolation at home environment and back into an office where they can be social and engaged, and share different experiences with clients and so on. So we're looking to go out to our employees then to really find out, okay, we do have people that want to come back into the office. This is what our premises, our landlord is providing. What is it going to take to make you feel safe as an employee? So,
agreed. Thank you. And it's really challenging trying to wrap this up after the six of you have spoken. I don't really have much new to add, but I guess my perspective is really on the opportunity for employers to focus on what great opportunity this provides for change. We've always heard that necessity is the mother of invention. You've been given this catalytic opportunity to make a positive change in your workforce. It's a great time to look at what is it your organization does and what do you need your employees to contribute versus where do they need to be. Really focus on what do they do and how do we best support them in doing their tasks versus looking at everything in terms of having to be at an office. I think the other thing that we haven't quite touched upon is we've seen this transition to instantly working from home as the pandemic struck. Now we're talking about lifting restrictions. At the same time, we're talking about the possibility of a second wave. So I think businesses really need to be nimble and agile in terms of what do we do under these circumstances? What do we do under those circumstances? How can we ebb and flow with things that we can't necessarily control? And then on top of that, how do we support people from a mental health perspective, not just from the stress of the pandemic, but the stress of working from home when there isn't an alternative activity, right? We normally recharge through weekends, through evenings, maybe we play sports, family time, going out for dinner. All of those things have been dramatically changed, if not removed from our lives. So employees are having a hard time recharging. We're all having a hard time recharging. Not only can we not separate our workday from our personal life. We've all seen the Facebook jokes of, oh, I'm going to go spend the weekend in the living room instead of the office. But it really does impact our productivity and our well-being. So let's go around one more time with sort of a key takeaway for folks, and then we'll wrap it up. So Sylvie, back to you.
Well, this is great. I really appreciate listening to everyone, and some key words that stand out for me. One was the role of leaders. I think Adriana talked about that, and culture. And connected to that is trust and agility. I think, Sue, you were just mentioning agility. And then investments, plans, and tools. So from the macro to the micro, from the individual to the collective, those are the things that stand out for me.
And thank you. Bev?
I think the point that you raised, I really like that this happened so suddenly, and my client that really did not like the fact of anybody working from home realized it's working quite well. They're all quite productive, and it's turned out to be quite a positive thing. So that'll be interesting as they phase people back in. And one thing I wanted to add, people that do have children at home, we know now the schools are closed till September. If the government regulations say you can go back to the office, employers have to be careful. If someone has children at home, they could be discriminating against them if they're trying to get them to come back to the office if they don't have daycare, because that would be discrimination based on family status. So that's something that we'll have to be careful with our employers on that piece.
Absolutely. Anne?
Yes. So I think to Sue, two things you said. I think the opportunity for change. I think, for me, I'm too focused on how do we, what's the next step versus thinking, this is really an opportunity and a chance for them to do things differently in their business. And I think the other is that you tweaked for me is plan for second wave. That wasn't on my planning, even, what I need to go back to the employer today of getting people back to work. But I really need to be thinking about what's a plan B? What if a second wave hits us? What are we prepared to do? And this time we have an opportunity to be ready and have a plan in place. So those are my thoughts.
Adriana?
You've nailed it right on the head, Anne. The big thing around this situation is that it was a crisis, and we had to react to the crisis. And it's about, I strongly believe it's about us working with our clients and leaders in general, thinking through what are all the things that I need to do? What have I learned? And how do I prepare my business and plan and set up my business so that I don't need to worry about reacting as much? Whether it's reacting to what the government's going to do, whatever the case, if you're sitting down as a leadership team and really thinking through where are you going, as you said, and what does your business need to look like, I believe that it helps you to put plans in place that helps mitigate some of that risk of, another wave or whatever the case may be. The other thing that's very important, which Forrest talked about as well, is engaging your teams. We don't know, no leader knows everything there is to know. So to the extent that you can be transparent, that you can engage your people in helping you resolve, they may have ideas, right? So how do you do all of that and almost move into that planning for the future mode with your leadership team, but more importantly with your teams as well, to ensure that you have a fuller picture of what's coming.
Forrest?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Adriana. I think one thing that's really stood out to me is the commonality between all the situations that our clients are dealing with, despite the fact that they cover a wide variety of industries and different management styles. And that is one of the unique things about this situation is we're all adapting to the same crisis. And I think it's important that we not just look to our own industries or to companies that we normally try to model ourselves after, but learn from across industries. And I think there's a lot we can learn right now about how, supermarkets and those kind of stores have dealt with this over the long term, how what they've done to keep their employees safe, where they failed and where they've run into publicity issues or issues with their staff, even if that wouldn't normally be an industry that we look to. And generally, I think it's one of the benefits of these calls and being able to connect with one another is even if we're dealing with clients with very different circumstances, there will always be something innovative that a different client is doing that because of the uniqueness of COVID-19 we can apply regardless of the circumstances of that client.
Todd.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I think what's interesting for me, because it's just really interesting points coming up right now, is if you look at our clients and organizations. I mean, they've been paying consulting firms huge money for years to transform their workforce and culture, and here we are. It's the trigger's been pulled, and it's been done for free, with no way out. But in that sense, though, there's been a lot of opportunity created. So I think where there's a lot of positive is looking to see how we move forward in this new state and transform, again, not just our workforce but our cultures to be more engaging, more efficient, effective, and being able to serve the clients and move them forward as well. But I do think we have to keep in mind again, this is a huge change element, and a lot of the employees, both in the client sites and in our own organizations, are not going to be able to manage this or aren't managing it as well as everyone. It won't be consistent. So that's where I think the leaders and the management play a key role in ensuring that employees maintain engaged, concerns remain heard. And employees are also consulted on where are the opportunities, right, as we move forward in this new state.
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, it's so tough going last after this amazing, brilliant colleagues. But for me, I think the three things to sort of take away, if I could put them in just a bulleted list, would be the need for collaboration. None of us have been through this before. None of us have the answers or the experience. So, collaboration is always important for creative problem solving, but even more so now. Two, we're not trying to get back to normal. In fact, what normal was in February 2020 may never exist again. So I think it's more really focusing on moving forward, not trying to get back to where we were. And third, for those of you who just noticed my son climb up on my lap, the need for compassion, right? None of us have control over a lot of what's going on at the moment. We're all doing the best that we can. And, thank you. I'm very grateful to the folks that I work with for the compassion. And I think we all need to put a little bit more compassion into our own leadership styles. So thanks very much for joining us.